Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and for today's episode we cover cloud-native software development. It solves a lot of problems initially, going cloud-native, but my guest Léon Rodenburg highlights the new problems it creates as well, and he explains the complexity we're dealing with. Léon is a good friend of mine and a friend of the show, returning guest actually, and all the links to his socials are in the description below. And with that being said, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Beyond Coding, a dive into the world of successful people in IT. From your sponsors, Zebia, creating digital leaders. Here's your host, Patrick Akil.
Hey, Léon.
Hey.
How's it going?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be back in a really nice studio, actually. So last time we were recording this, we were in a different place. And there's been some upgrades.
Yeah, we leveled up since the last time.
Yeah.
I think we were at the second floor, somewhere upstairs here.
Yeah, that's true. And it was also really crowded because it was in a corridor. So people had to, people walk past us all the time. And then the door opens and then people suddenly they're scared that there's a recording going on. And then you see them sort of awkwardly looking around. Is there an option for me to go past this or not? Yeah. I think this is much better. So this is really cozy here.
Exactly. The only thing we need is a we're recording button.
Yeah,
because if people still walk in sometimes. We've had that on previous episodes.
And then, it's not necessarily a problem if they walk in. Well, if they just walk in.
Exactly.
If they walk in and they're talking or shouting, then that's actually, I think, the biggest problem.
Yeah, that is. I think that's the only thing that's lacking for the recording setup. But I mean, I can't complain, right? It's we have beautiful screens. We might even show some stuff on the screens at some point. Setup is nice. Microphones. It's completely isolated. So I can't complain, basically.
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Cool. I invited you on to talk about cloud-native software development. It's a whole mouthful of a term nowadays. Let's start off with, if someone says cloud-native, what does that mean? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about cloud-native software development for some time now, and that's also the point where you start overloading terms. So I think it has several definitions depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sort of share what I think cloud-native software development is.
Yeah.
And that is that you use the best of the options available to you from a or multiple cloud providers to develop your software, and that you start from that. So the first thing you do is actually look around in what I always call the candy shop.
Yeah.
Look around in the candy shop, see what's actually there, see if there's a fit, and then start building. And by doing that, you can be up and running really quickly.
Yeah.
You don't have to consider a few things you might need to consider in more traditional software development, especially on the deployment side, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's all not needed for cloud-native development.
Exactly.
Cloud-native development does not necessarily mean serverless or anything. You can also do cloud-native development on a lower level.
Yeah.
But I think it's always good to start and figure out if serverless is enough for your case, and if not, go down a step.
Yeah.
And if then the managed services that they offer that are a bit more low level are not enough, you can go down a step and go down a step and down, until you're at the regular infrastructure level that you still use from your cloud provider. So you're still cloud native, you're using cloud technology, just on a lower level compared to going all the way into serverless, for example.
Exactly. I really like the analogy of a candy store, because as a kid, choices are hard, right? And also with this cloud thing that we have now as software engineers, there's a lot of options to kind of solve the problems that we have. And there's not going to be an exact right answer, right? There's going to be multiple right answers, but they're all going to have trade-offs.
Exactly.
If we step back, you probably saw at some point in your career that the cloud was going to become a thing. What was your first kind of introduction with cloud-native development? Yes.
My first introduction with it was actually my first introduction to cloud was a lift and shift.
Yeah.
So there was something running on premise, that machine needed to run in the cloud, and that was it. So and then if you look at it like that, then cloud is sort of an alternative to running something on premise or running it on your machine next to your coffee machine. I don't know. Then cloud is of course it's a managed service. You pay per second or per billing cycle.
Yeah.
So it's more flexible. But if you just do lift and shifts, then you don't really get a lot of the benefits, I think, especially on the software development, because the software that you're deploying is going to be exactly the same. It's just running elsewhere.
Exactly.
So the first time I really started using it was when we were considering building a backend application, and then starting immediately from using a cloud provider.
Yeah.
And then you're going to look into that into that candy store, and you think, okay, I see a service here. What does it do? And is it going to fit the pattern that we need? And from then on, we built out a pretty extensive serverless application. And then we also figured out that there are, like you said, trade-offs to be made, and it's not necessarily always the best option to choose whatever there is and to take everything from the candy store, because if you buy everything and you eat them all, then you're going to be sick.
Exactly.
So you need to make choices. Also, things might look interesting, but then once you eat it, it's actually sour, right? So candies are not always what you think they are, and it's the same with cloud services. You think, oh, this fits my use case exactly. And then there's one line in the documentation that will actually tell you that it might not be a good fit for what you're working on. Yeah. So you need to be careful. And I think the first experience for us was actually just going into that list of services and figuring out what we could combine to build up something, and it worked in the end. Yeah. But yeah, there are challenges that you have, so it's still challenging. Like, it's not going to make your life easier per se. Yeah. It's just you shift the focus of the problems that you're solving. So you're probably going to have a shorter time to solve these problems, which means you can go faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is similar to what I experienced in that we also were doing a cloud migration. I wasn't necessarily involved though. So I saw that we were going to have the exact same thing, except running not on our own data center, but on someone else's, right? On the cloud provider's data center. And then the next step for me was, okay, we want to do cloud native software development. We're going to build something that doesn't exist yet. And we're really going to leverage what we have, right? So we really looked into, okay, we're a small team. We don't want to have a lot of infrastructure overhead. So we looked into serverless, right? Multiple candy stores. I mean, you have Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. I don't know why necessarily. I think it was a lot having to do with the organization, but we went with GCP, Google Cloud. And then we looked into App Engine, because this was a few years ago. Cloud Run wasn't a thing yet. And we started small, right? Really just deploying an initial proof of concept. App Engine already made sure that it could scale for us if the load was there. And we improved upon that. But what I really realized is that there's a lot of unknowns, right? And if you don't know the unknowns, how are you going to solve that? Or how is that for you?
Yeah, you just solve that by experiencing them. So exactly. You can, of course, go through the documentation of some service and then read everything, and then you're gonna be stuck in the analysis phase forever. Yeah. So I think it's good to just also get experience with that, working with them, and just building stuff. It can be smaller projects or side projects. Take a combination of services and just, if you have a goal in mind, try to implement that using the services that you think are a fit. Yeah. And then once you've implemented it, you're going to figure out if there was a good experience or if there were a lot of problems in the meantime. Yeah. I think App Engine is actually, I think it's being used less, but it was sort of serverless before. It was cool. Yeah. So it was one of the first actual serverless offerings, I think, and Google did really well there. Yeah. And then again, like, there are lots of services like that, and they offer similar experiences, and similar features. Yeah. But still, there are slight differences. So if you're running serverless functions in AWS, it's going to be different than if you run Google Cloud functions. Exactly. There are minor, like some things are pretty major because you need to format your code in a certain way, or those are really impactful. And there are also some minor changes, like, can I connect this to other things that I have running within my network boundary, or those things you need to know actually before you can, actually, if you need to do that, if you need to connect your serverless function to something that is server full, like running on a machine in your private network, then you need to know if that offering of lambdas or function compute does actually offer that feature to you or not. Yeah. So you can do that by experimentation, but you might be too late. And what do you do then? Because you're sort of already stuck in that framework. And then it will take a lot of time to actually rebuild it into something else. Yeah. And I think that's still also a world to win in cloud is, making things more transferable. Because a lot of App Engine is a good example. You need to format your application in such a way. You need to write, I haven't used it extensively, but I think you need to write a sort of a YAML specification of how you want to map things. Yeah. And you need to have your entry points matching with some Google SDK so that it knows how to call your application. Yeah. Which means that if you want to transfer that to AWS or Azure, you're going to have to re-architect at least the entry point of your application to make sure that it can run there. And I think that, of course, it's commercially not really handy to make sure that stuff is transferable from your cloud to someone else's cloud.
Yeah.
But as an ecosystem, I think it's important to start focusing on that. Like, how can I make sure that whenever I develop something cloud natively and maybe serverless, how can we make sure that it's still transferable to another cloud easily?
Yeah, exactly. I think if you take that standpoint and you build your software around that, then you don't necessarily have that buy-in, right? Within a certain cloud provider or within a certain way of working.
Yeah, but it also limits your options.
Oh, yeah.
And that's again the candy store. You cannot take everything, because if you are thinking about maybe migrating your stuff out at some point, or if your organization has a policy around that, so that you're not allowed to be sort of stuck in a single cloud provider, then you need to look up front. Like, is this service actually something that's easily transferable, or do we need to go maybe a bit lower level to make sure that we use an open standard that can easily be implemented on a different cloud provider? So you're constantly, cloud native development, you're not bothering too much with all the lower level infrastructure, requesting machines, sending out tickets to some team somewhere in the building and hoping that they respond within 3 months. You don't have stuff like that. But you have other challenges. You have too many options. And you need to trim it down into sort of like a subset of those that fit your use case. And that actually takes some insights and experience on how they work and how they work together. And especially if you add on top of that the notion of maybe making it easy to transfer out to a different cloud provider. It's not going to make your life simpler per se. It's just a different level of thinking about things.
Exactly. I completely agree, right? The cloud has solved some established problems that we have, or they weren't necessarily problems, but it has resolved some things, right? In a more traditional sense, I had an infrastructure team, and that had a storage or a platform and even a security guy within that team, right? It was a whole operation of people. And with cloud native development, you don't necessarily have that, right? But all those tools then come to the software engineer. And serverless makes it very easy infrastructure-wise, because you can deploy your code and it runs and it scales and it has dynamic IP configuration, to name one of them. But then when you actually need that infrastructure knowledge, or as you say, go a lower level, if you don't know your stuff, then it's going to be hard, I think.
Yeah, and that's I think it's really similar to if you think like really long back, then working with a database, you would have to have a database administrator. It was just a role that was in the company, and there still probably are a lot of them, and they are like experts on database technology and how to make sure that the data is stored in an efficient way, and making sure that the queries can be answered that you want to like ask to the data, like find me this amount of records filtered by that. You need to make a design to make sure that it's efficient.
And fast.
And fast. And I think that knowledge partially transferred onto developers, because I think most developers will know how to work with a relational database. It's just part of the curriculum of a developer to know that, and to know how to add an index if you want to quickly search for something without having to do like a full table scan. But then if it comes to cloud, I hear a lot of developers actually say, I don't want to know any of that stuff. It should just work. But why is that? Because the database administrator knowledge transferred into developers. The same thing happened for testing. There used to be separate testers that wrote all kinds of integration, acceptance tests, and they would run the suite, and the developers would not know anything about it. They didn't care. At some point, that also became part of the curriculum. So why is cloud now still the thing that they don't care about and that they want to offload from their responsibilities? Well, I think it should be transferred into the curriculum. And you don't have to be an expert on IP level networking to be effective at using the cloud. You just need to know your tools a little bit better. And I think that's what we're seeing currently, is sort of a split between developers that try to use cloud and then look up the documentation and then put stuff together.
Make it work.
Make it work. And then it works. And then it breaks. And then what do you do? And then they're sort of confused, like, okay, maybe this service wasn't a good fit. Or then they draw a conclusion, try to migrate it to something else, and then it breaks again. I think it just comes down to some knowledge that you still need as a developer regarding cloud, just like you need knowledge about databases and knowledge about testing. It's just a part of what you sort of need to know to be efficient and effective. And one good example for that, and that's the thing that I always see going wrong, is one that you mentioned, is security. I've worked with quite a lot of teams, and what I almost always see go wrong is that there is someone who sort of has more knowledge about cloud, and they set up a good permission model, like a developer can do this, You have different accounts where we run the different environments. You can assume roles in those accounts to do things like administer something or deploy something.
Yeah.
You have a separate user for the pipeline, so CI/CD is also secure. And then that person leaves, and then the rest of the team is left with a pretty complex permission model that they have no clue about how it works. And then they just end up copy-pasting that, or just even worse, giving someone admin access. Like, oh, yeah, well, you're a developer, you know what you're doing, so we're just going to grant you administrator access, and that's it.
Yeah.
And before you know it, that user is going to be used in the CI/CD pipeline. It's going to be used in the front end without any restrictions. And then that single user is going to be all over the place. It's like sharing your password with everyone.
Exactly.
It's just not what you do.
Yeah.
And I think based on that experience, I think it's good if everyone knows a little bit about how these permission models work. And of course, they're different in each cloud provider because the models are not necessarily the same. But if you are working with Azure, I think it's important to invest a little time in understanding how that model works and what the best practices are around setting up something like that for your organization or your team.
Yeah.
To at least make sure that you don't fall into that trap of opening up something that you don't want to open up.
Exactly.
And those are the things I think should be part of that sort of developer knowledge base, that as a developer you at least know like the concept behind the permission model and one or two specific implementations from maybe Azure and AWS. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if that's part of everyone's knowledge, then if one person knows more and can do more and that person leaves, it doesn't necessarily impact security or impact the CI/CD pipeline or impact anything that you can do and anything that you are doing to develop your software.
Yeah.
And I think we're still going to need people that know more about cloud, just like we still need people that are really good in testing and just it's sort of a mindset. I think the same goes for database administrators. They look at problems in a different way so they can manage the data effectively. Testers look at UIs and at software in a different way. So they're really effective in finding all kinds of edge cases that just need to be tested.
Yeah.
And I think cloud engineers also look at problems in a different way because they want to make sure that it's that the infrastructure is easily managed, it's easily destroyed and redeployed, so it's replaceable.
Yeah.
Maybe easily transferable, depending on if you need to be able to migrate to a different cloud.
Yeah.
And if you look at problems like that, you have a sort of a different mindset, which will help you to come up with an effective solution.
Yeah.
And we're combining everything, all that knowledge into a developer. So then as a developer, you need to have sort of 4 views on things.
Yeah,
like a data view, a testing view, a cloud view. So it's and of course just a software development view. And it's a lot, but still I think we're moving in that direction. That just like we don't have a separate testing team now, we kind of saw that it was better to have those people within the team, or even better, just have everyone be responsible for that.
Yeah.
Same with databases. So to me, it sounds really logical that the next step for us is to have the same with cloud. Like everyone is responsible for the environment you're running your software in.
Yeah.
And if that's serverless, then that means you're also responsible for the serverless deployment that you're doing within your cloud provider, which also means the permission model that's behind it, and all the things that you need to know to run it successfully.
Yeah, agreed. The team is responsible in the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And if someone leaves, you can't have a knowledge gap that's as huge as you just overlapping your permission model and giving everyone access, right?
Yeah.
You would know that giving your own access to someone else is not really a good idea. Then what about the super user that you've created? You can't give that access to everyone else.
No.
And you are, as developers or as a team, you're still going to be accountable, even for the things that you don't actually know. But when shit hits the fan, people are going to ask, well, how did that account end up in the hands of the people that misused it, right? Oh, apparently it's used everywhere. It's in the CI/CD, the front end uses it, right? It's everywhere. But you as a team, you knew that, right? You knew that there's something smelly there. You know you need to resolve it in a different way, in a better way.
Yeah.
But you need to actually take that step and make it right, basically.
Yeah, and people, I think developers are generally afraid. They're sort of, it's black boxy. It's like, it's a whole new world out there. And so the first reaction is to try to shield yourself from it. Because if you cannot make mistakes, then you won't make them.
Yeah.
And that's when you get, and that I've seen it happen, is that you have a team where there's one person who knows about infra, and all the tickets on the board that are relating to infrastructure are automatically assigned to that person. and then everyone's waiting till that person is back from holiday, or if maybe they work part-time or 1 day a week, or I don't know, then every time, what's the progress on this? The cloud engineer is not back from holiday yet, so no progress.
Exactly.
Well, it should be. It's the team's responsibility. You pick up a story from the board, whether it's writing a test, implementing a new feature, or making changes to the infrastructure in a good way. I think it should theoretically be possible that the whole team knows enough about cloud to be able to do that. So I think it's really important to, if you are in a team that has a single person that knows more about cloud, or even worse, if you're a team that has no cloud knowledge and you need to ask another team to do stuff for you to your deployment, so it's actually your software that's running in production. If you need to ask other people to do it, then I think it's time to try to invest some of your time into owning it. Trying to figure out, how does it work? So the first question is, how does my permission model work? So I have access keys here. How do I end up, I can call an API, but how does my cloud provider then determine if I have the correct permissions to do this? And if someone walks you through that process once or twice, you'll know it. And from then onwards, you can also start editing it a little bit. And then you read up on it and you study it a little bit. And that goes also for maybe DNS and certificates. It's always a thing. To me, it's sort of natural to ask the why or how question. So whenever someone says, we need to change this, and then the first thing I'm going to ask, why do we need to do that? And then how? And then that's how I learn. So if people then explain to me, we have DNS records living there. This is the DNS service of our cloud provider. We define our records in this, Terraform repository, or somewhere where the infra is deployed. And then I know. So then I can also start making suggestions for changes, or I can pick up tasks or stories myself that relate around that. And I think if you just keep asking those questions, you'll learn just by doing, and by just listening to others that have more knowledge. And then pretty soon you should be really comfortable working with anything in the cloud, and making sure that you don't open everything up to the world and start leaking all kinds of data. And it's worth investing your time, I think. And so if you recognize that you're in a team that has to have a separate expert regarding cloud, then I think it will be a good investment to start asking questions.
I mean, I recognize that when I first started out, there's going to be many unknowns, right? Security and permissions is going to be one of them. But even how can I do this? How can I call this service and get it up and running in the cloud? How can I get started in the first place? I wish there was kind of a list of maybe importance, I guess, of things to figure out. Because DNS, I pushed that back as far as possible until I was actually responsible. I mean, I was always responsible, but I never had to make any changes. So then when I did, obviously, I relied on the people that knew how to do it. And I tried to gain an understanding myself, right? Make that unknown to myself. So then I could actually do it and have the account that I have within the team, basically. But I did push it back as far as possible. It was first trying to figure out all the other stuff, right? And it keeps piling on, I feel like. Even the things we mentioned, testability, you can go buck wild in testing frameworks, what's the best model, what's too small, what's too big. Security, even like how much security is too much. What's the risk appetite of the organization, and does our application fit with that? Or do we need to adjust things? Even with cloud now, I had Michel Zitman on, and he explained FinOps to me. I'm like, man, running it, securing it, deploying it, and the whole operations is not enough. It can also be a huge cost sink, basically, if you don't have an understanding of how the model works there. But it keeps piling on. I just want a list that says, all right, these things in order, make sure you get them. This is the bare minimum kind of.
You can look at maybe courses that you can find about cloud, but the problem is that most of the courses I've seen, most of the trainings I've done or also given, they start from the basics. So they start from the bottom up. They start from provisioning a machine, putting Ubuntu on it, installing Apache or Nginx, and then trying to give it a public IP address, and then browsing to it, and then you see the Nginx welcome page. That's sort of the basic hello world of cloud. But actually, if you look at cloud native development, the chances that you're going to use that is actually the least compared to serverless things. So I think actually cloud trainings might be a good idea to start like reversing them.
Yeah.
Start with serverless technology, learn about that, and then by doing that, understand what the cloud provider has automated away for you.
Exactly.
And then if you need those parts, learn those.
Yeah.
Because in the end, if you use a serverless technology, the cloud provider is just dog fooding their own services. So they're just repackaging their services, abstracting away some of the implementation details, giving it a new name, giving it a new price, and then selling it to you.
Yeah.
But it is based on the original technologies, like the original, I know, object storage, S3 kind of storage solutions.
Yeah.
It's running almost everything that you have in the cloud, because almost always you need to store stuff. So they're going to use their own service for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It baffles my mind that you say it's from bottom up, because in a real life example, you're never going to work from bottom up, right? You're going to see top down, okay, this is what we have. And then when something doesn't really work as you expect it, you need to go one level lower, exactly as you explained.
Yeah.
But if you give the training from bottom up, then how are you going to figure out what actually happens at the top in the first place?
It's the same as if you're going to learn Kotlin, but then they first explain to you how the compiler works.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not going to work. Like even if you have like a lot of experience with development, you're almost never, or probably never, going to develop a compiler or develop your own programming language.
Yeah.
There's only a really small group of people that actually do that actively, and need to know about it. For other people, it's not too interesting. Like it helps if you know about it, of course, but there's certain level at which you're gonna stop.
Yeah,
like
I'm
okay,
pushing that back still.
Yeah. So these implementation details I don't care about anymore.
Exactly.
So with cloud, I think it should be the same. You should go from top to bottom. So you start at, I just need to implement a backend service with storage, and it needs to be scalable.
Yeah.
That is a problem, and you can find a solution for that. Well, if you then choose the most bottom service, like a virtual machine with a load balancer, with just a disk that you mount to the machine, then it's going to be a lot of work. And then you need to know a lot of moving parts before you can actually deploy something that works.
Yeah.
If you go top to bottom, you might be done in an hour or two.
Exactly.
Depending on how you do it. But then you might figure out, like at some point, oh, wow, and now I need caching.
Yeah.
Then you need to go a bit lower, because there are, as far as I know, not a lot of serverless caching solutions. So you need to have a managed service for that, which is a bit lower on the serverless scale. So then you learn about that. But to deploy a managed service, you probably also need to know a little bit about networking, because you need to attach it to a network. Yeah. So then you slowly start to learn new things, instead of like here's the big bang of everything about IPs, subnets, virtual private networks, I don't know, the whole shebang. Yeah. And then you, at the end of the day, you still feel that you've built something that is not going to be a useful case anyway, because the chances of you deploying something manually on an EC2 instance, like a virtual machine, are really small. Yeah. So I think if you change it around, it's also going to be a bit more gradual introduction to cloud, instead of like the big bang and then, sort of overloading people with too much things that they don't actually care about. Exactly.
I mean, it's very theoretical, right? The cloud has solved a lot of problems. Then why are we zooming in on the problems and how it solved it, instead of being like, okay, this is a tool, right? It solved those problems. Let's use it and zoom in on the new problems that it's created, or the new challenges that we have in using it, right? Yeah. And if you figure out those, then you can be effective with the tools that you're given, because you know how you can best use it. Yeah. But exactly, I think if we step back, you already mentioned, right, there's a lot of documentation, huge candy store with lots of candies to pick from. I love the approach of starting small, iterating, improving, making sure that it can scale, right? Testing your assumptions, the whole agile methodology. Can you still do that within a cloud provider? I would hope so, right? Yeah, I think you can actually do that. Yeah. So if the easiest way to do it is just by the count of the number of services that you actually use. Yeah. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that doesn't say anything about the complexity level. Yeah. Because if you use one service, it can still be pretty complex. Yeah. But yeah, if you just try to get the least amount of services together to solve your problem, then I think you can already try to do that. And if you choose the right options, then you're going to get a few things for free, like scalability, like security. Of course, you still need to consider it, but if you choose a service that sort of grew from a best practice, I don't know, AWS Amplify as an example, it's a collection of serverless services configured in such a way that AWS thinks that you're going to be most effective as a development team. Yeah. So there are a lot of
best practices that have been uncovered over the years are incorporated in it. So if you choose that, then you're likely to do it the right way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to know anything about the underlying things that you're actually using. So one of those is Dynamodb, which is a great product for storing non-relational data, but it's also a complex product.
Yeah.
And the details of DynamoDB are sort of leaking into Amplify. So if you use Amplify, but you don't know DynamoDB, you're going to run into problems for sure. Like there's going to be a use case that you cannot support using DynamoDB, or there's a certain query that you cannot run efficiently because you haven't formatted the data in such a way that it runs efficiently.
Yeah.
So I think if you then start from AWS Amplify, you can build your application pretty fast and have it up and running pretty fast without considering DNS and certificates. You get all that for free.
Yeah.
And then you can start to see, does it still fit? Or is my problem evolving? And do I need to also evolve my solution?
Yeah.
And by that, you're going to maybe figure out, I need to drag in an extra service to do this. I need to drag another service in to do it. And it's going to grow. But then, I think you can still start small by using the best practices that are offered to you by a cloud provider, which I think every cloud provider will offer.
Yeah.
And from those best practices, you can start dragging in the things you need.
Exactly.
I think that's similar to the more traditional way of doing it. It's just, start small. Take one or two things, try to make it work. And only when there's no other option to make it work in a scalable or efficient way or not too complex way, then you start dragging in new things.
Exactly.
If you make a really complex design with like you start with a diagram and then we have storage there and you draw a line and we have compute there and we have caching and we have networking and you make that design up front and then try to implement it, you're going to figure out that while implementing it, it doesn't maybe fit.
Yeah.
So just like we know that designing your whole architecture of a system up front is often just not doable or a waste because it's going to change anyway. The reality is changing, so you need to begin small and then start improving on things, iterating on it. You can also iterate on your cloud infrastructure and in the way you build applications in the cloud.
Yeah.
Just start small and then iterate.
Exactly.
And then as soon as you need to do an iteration of which you feel, okay, what we currently have is not going to support this, then you're going to look around you.
Yeah.
You're going to look around, are there other services that solve this problem? Is there maybe a configuration that we haven't seen that will actually make this better? Or is there an alternative? And I think that's the same approach that you would use in the more traditional software development in an agile way.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things I love about it, right? A lot of stuff is abstracted away. And early on in my career, I didn't know what was even abstracted away, but I knew it could solve my problem, right? Or at least I would hope it did. And after testing, so it could prove that it did, or otherwise we would have a discussion within the team to use something else or add something to the complexity that we have, right? But always try and keep it simple, maintainable within the team and the people that you have.
Yeah.
We've had conversations where we would need to have a VM running because we needed a static IP to connect to a third service party. And at the end of the day, we said, listen, we don't want any of that, okay? We don't have it. We only have 3 people. We're not going to do that. We're not going to connect to that third service. Let's look at a party that actually doesn't require us to do so. Yeah. So we can keep it simple, right? Keep it lean. Yeah. Also within the infrastructure that we have, basically.
Yeah, and that's the question that you always need to ask yourself. Like, look back, and is this still maintainable? Yeah. Are new people that come to this project easily onboarded, or do we need to spend 2 weeks explaining everything to them? Yeah. Well, if you need to explain 2 weeks, use 2 weeks to explain it, then that's a red flag. Then it might be too complex to comprehend. Yeah. That goes for the architecture of the software, but also for the infrastructure. Yeah. If you have a single serverless, if you have App Engine, you can explain it in, an hour or so, and then read up on the documentation, and you're done. Exactly. But if you're extending that with all kinds of homegrown connections to different types of services, a CMS, headless CMS, you add a third-party identification provider or auth provider. You need to have a different type of storage because what App Engine offers is too expensive. Yeah. And then if you start to build like an architecture like that, then it's just going to be too complex. Exactly. And thereby you're sort of killing your efficiency and also the maintainability of your solution. Exactly. Your solutions or solutions to the problems that you have create more side effects, right? Create other problems that you have in that maintainability or even
explainability when there's a new person that's joining the team.
Yeah, so start small and iterate fast are also part of cloud native software development, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned getting more kind of cloud knowledge within the team. I'm a big fan of pair programming or even mob programming. I'm doing a lot of pairing, not necessarily mobbing, but I think that's a great way of just spreading the knowledge, right, within the team. Oh, there's an infrastructure ticket. You're the infrastructure guy. Let's do it together, right? And you can explain exactly your thought process on how things work and what we actually need to do to resolve this thing. Yeah. And thereby spreading the knowledge within the team, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach. So just have that person sort of invite them to share their knowledge if they're not naturally inclined to do it. Yeah. And that you can do that by pairing up. Another thing you could do is have that person organize sessions around showing you through the infrastructure code base, because often it's separated from the actual code that's running. Yeah. In my opinion, it should be as close as possible, but you always have some overarching infrastructure things like DNS or other things that need to be centrally managed. Yeah. So often these end up in a different repository that's out of sight of the team, and that's also why it stays black boxy, because you're not confronted with it every time. But you should make it so that you're actually confronted with it, because it's good to tackle these things and just gain knowledge about them. Yeah. And if you're unsure how to do it, then you just ask the expert. Like ask a cloud engineer, or ask a team member from a different team that works in the platform team or whatever team you have for doing infrastructure related stuff, and they will start rattling about a lot of things. Oh yeah, IAM, permissions, policies, actions. You're like, what? Just take it easy, and then go step by step. Okay, so what is IAM? Okay, so IAM is about permissions. So what is a role actually, and how does it work? And how does a role relate to a user? Okay, and then a user can have policies, but do policies also? Yeah, what's a policy? Yeah. And how do you write policies? What's the syntax for them? Is that something you click together in the console, or do you do that in an automated way? Yeah. And then gradually you're gonna, if you keep on asking questions, and most cloud engineers, or all of the cloud engineers that I've encountered are really happy to talk about it. So they're really happy to explain, and they're also often really, happy that you're actually showing interest in it, because it is a sort of a field that's always been, you solve it. Yeah. So if you actually show interest and say, I want to learn how this works, I want to understand what it does, and I want to be able to contribute to the code base, then they will also be really happy. Yeah. And you can start working together. Maybe you can explain them a little bit about the concerns that you have within software development, the things you need to think about, so they can also gain some knowledge. And then you have a mutual flow of knowledge, which in the end will make sure that the cloud knowledge is in your team. And if one person leaves, your efficiency is not impacted. You can still deploy, you can still extend your infrastructure, improve on it, iterate on it. Yeah. So I think that's really really good.
Yeah, I think that's the best case scenario, right? Where a lot of people know a lot about, smaller things, I guess, right? You don't need to be an expert in software development and an expert in cloud and security and testing, right? But pick one or two and try to be, I think, effective. If I look back, I always wanted to be effective, right? If I learn about theory, but I can't practice that theory, right? I can't put it into practice, then I would rather focus on something I can put into practice, right? Yep. Because I want to be more effective. Yep. That's why I love when you say, you're not going to be confronted with it. Maybe we should confront you with it, so you actually learn. Yeah,
then you're triggered to actually learn something. Exactly. And then at first you're gonna be confused. Like you're looking at it and you're not sure. Like, what is Terraform? Yeah. And why do we have Terraform? Exactly. What is it for? So all those kinds of questions, people might have an idea about it, but have never actually seen Terraform or have never worked with it. Yeah. Then the syntax is gonna look really strange. Because it looks like code, but it's not. It's a declaration. It's not code that you read from top to bottom, and then you see statements, and then there's a result at the end of the function. Yeah, it is like a blueprint. So if you look at it, you need to understand that you need to look at it like that, and that you just need to be told that you need to look at it like that, and then pieces of the puzzle start fitting and clicking together. Exactly. And then gradually you're going to become pretty knowledgeable about cloud, which makes sure that then at least you're confident about changing anything in your infrastructure. Yeah. And also you know exactly which pieces you know and which pieces you don't. So you know exactly when you need to ask like external expertise from another team or another person, because you know that you haven't touched that piece before, or you know that you haven't used that service before. But if you know the basics, then you're also comfortable like learning more and reading the docs of a certain service to understand what it is about.
Yeah.
If you're completely new to something and you start reading the documentation, then you're going to be overloaded with more terms, and then you're going to be more confused than that it helps, I think. So if you first work with someone to get the basics down, then the rest of your journey into the cloud can be sort of done on the job by just picking up tickets, asking the right questions, and then you learn and you learn and you learn.
Exactly.
And it's constant. You're never finished learning. So and that's I think the fun. It's just like programming languages. You're never done. You haven't. There's always more.
Yeah.
Even when you think you've seen them all, there's a new one.
Yeah.
And then you can learn about that. I think with cloud it's the same. At some point you maybe get certified. You think, okay, now I'm certified in cloud, so I know every service.
Yeah.
And then you start subscribing to the newsletter of that cloud provider to see what new services they have, and you figure out that they have 20 or 30 new ones every month.
Yeah.
So then you're never done learning.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you can keep on learning. There's new stuff coming out every day, and it's also tough to keep up because so you need to be able to filter out the things that are relevant to you and the things that are not. And to be able to do that, you need to know a little bit about what it is and what the offering is that they're talking about. If you have no clue at all, then you also cannot assess if this might be something for you to actually start using or not.
Yeah, it can be confronting, the amount of knowledge that is, first of all, shared, right, which is an amazing thing. There's so much to how do you say that? There's so much out there for you to basically read or listen to, I mean, a podcast anyway, and just gain that knowledge. But then which one do you pick, right? I think it's fine to first be comfortable with one thing and then move on to the next one, instead of just spreading yourself thin and trying to learn about everything, because you're not going to use everything. That's kind of the problem of this. There's a lot of theory out there, but you always have your specific use case for your environment within your team and your organization, right? And within that, there's going to be gaps in knowledge.
Yeah.
And those you need to make sure you can comfortably be comfortable about, I guess, or make your own.
It's a good starting point to take the things that you need to work with on a daily basis and try to understand like how it works, why it works that way.
Yeah.
If there are pieces to improve on, or if everything's fine. It's just really easy to start from that, from something you're touching daily. And it's often also a good entry point into the rest. So once you have sort of a good understanding of what your project currently has in terms of infrastructure, it's also easier to see, hey, we have a new feature on the board, and it's a pretty big feature, and we're missing something in our current implementation to support that. Yeah. And then you'll probably notice that it's once you have an understanding of what there is, you also know what isn't there. So then you know that you need to look for a service that actually can support that use case. Yeah. And then because you've seen the pieces of your infrastructure, you will probably sort of have seen the other names of services as well that support certain things. So then you can already start investigating it something new. Yeah. So then for every new feature or every change in infrastructure, you can take a step out of your sort of comfort zone and then go into something that you're not comfortable with yet. Yeah. And then you learn. And then once you have a basic understanding of it, you can take up the next thing and then implement something. And then maybe you're gonna figure out that the solution you chose is not the best. Well, that's fine. You can just iterate on it, make a different choice, compare the two, run an experiment, see how it goes. And I think that's a good approach to actually use your daily work as a starting point. Yeah. And even so, you're going to be overloaded with lots of moving parts. Yeah. But just start small. Exactly. Ask one question tomorrow. Like tomorrow, ask one question to the cloud engineer about how something works, and then the next day ask another one. And if you do that daily, then I think in 2 or 3 weeks you will probably have covered everything that there is to know about the basic infrastructure. Yeah. You might not understand everything immediately, but the things you don't understand, you note them down. Those are going to be questions for the day after. Yeah. And by that, at some point, I think you'll understand how everything works, which is the start of your journey into the rest of the candy store. Exactly. Eventually, things will make sense, right? Yeah. Things that would be abstracted away years ago, all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, so that is exactly how it works. Or now I see it because it's actually put into practice here, or I needed to resolve it, right? And I think it's fine if you put yourself into an uncomfortable position, right? Don't make it too uncomfortable. Don't start shouting at people or stuff like that. But you will learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? As software engineers, you're not going to know everything.
So some stuff is going to be uncomfortable because you're going to have to say, I don't know that yet, but you need to be comfortable enough to say, I can figure it out, or we can figure it out as a team, right? Because not all the problems lie on your shoulders as an individual. It is within that team. And being comfortable enough to make use of the skills that you have and figure out things, I think that's a very beneficial and necessary skill as an individual or within a team to have that.
Yeah, the team should be a safe space. Should be safe enough to say, I want to fix this, but I just don't know how. So I'm going to figure it out.
Exactly.
And then you can do that in all kinds of ways. And I think there are some ways that are more efficient than others. Asking questions to people that know about it is really efficient. Diving into documentation of something and then 2 weeks later, like drawing up a report of what you learned might not be too effective. I think the hands-on approach is more effective. So ask someone over, do pair programming, implement it, and on the go, like while you're doing it, ask any questions that you come up with.
Exactly.
And that's going to be a really efficient way to learn stuff. And it should be within a team safe enough to just say, I don't know. I think it also shows, also maybe a bit seniority or experience if you can know exactly what you know and what you don't know. So and also to express that. So to express, I don't know anything about this. It's fine. It's an opportunity actually.
Exactly.
It's not a problem. And I have the feeling that we're more and more inclined in thinking in that direction. But with cloud, it's still, I don't know, so let other people handle it.
Exactly.
So that's not the right approach, I think. The approach should be, I don't know, so I'm going to learn about it. And I think if we start doing that with cloud as well, I think we can really have the same process as we had with testing, with the database administrations, like the things we started with. I think we can really have a basic understanding of cloud as part of a developer's daily job. And that's just because they need it to be effective. And then there are still parts that are going to be put on the shoulders of like the real cloud experts. And that's fine.
Exactly. I completely understand. How do you say that? I completely agree with that train of thought, right? Have that shared understanding within the team, and you don't need to be an expert, right? Some people or a few people within the team can be that expert, but just learn from each other and get that general knowledge in so you can be effective as a team, right? You don't have that huge gap when one of those people falls away. Cool, man. Thank you for coming on, Léon. I don't know for how long we talked, actually. I think it was a great convo.
I'm also not sure, but it was, that means it was a good conversation. I think if you lost track of time, then it's often it's often good.
Exactly. I think we did it about 40 episodes ago. We sat here, not here, but in a different space. Maybe in the next 40 or so episodes, we'll talk again.
I'm looking forward to it. So, I was really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. We'll put Léon's socials and stuff in the show notes, in the descriptions. If you've made it this far, leave us a rating or leave a comment saying what you thought about this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.